A few weeks ago, I shared my story about coming down to Costa Rica, and a big piece of that was around community. And so in today's solo cast, I want to dive into one of the most important conversations that I think we need to have, and that feels so relevant and so much in the collective consciousness of humanity right now, is this deep, deep desire to live and breathe real and authentic community. Welcome to the Brave Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Lynn, founder of Sistership Circle and author of Open Your Heart and The Art of Leading Circle. I'm the mother of 2 girls, an 8 on the Enneagram, aka the Challenger, happily married to my business partner, Brent, love connecting with nature, and have put in well over 10,000 hours circling with other women. On this podcast, we will explore how to embody the brave woman so that you can take action on your dreams and desires, unapologetically speak your truth, and live life on your own terms. Grab a seat and a cup of tea, and let's get started. There's a meme that I'm sure you've seen around, going and creating this homestead. I'll have to put it into the show notes. I'll find it and put in the show notes of this little girl who's ready to go and go on the land and build the community, right? And there's a lot of people who say that they want that. They want to live in community, but are they actually willing to do what it takes to build it? And that is a challenge. I'm not going to lie. Going to build community, actual physical community, means that there isn't one necessarily there, that you are actually the first to create it. That's where Brent and I are. But here's the thing. I have been essentially living in community my entire life. I grew up in a town that was very connected. And I grew up with 2 incredible human beings. My mom and dad loved to throw a party. And so the house that I grew up in, they built when I was in, I think, 1st and 2nd grade. And I moved in when I was in 3rd grade. And it had 2 acres of land with this incredible backyard with this huge pool, a basketball court, a volleyball court, these big lawns, with the intention of gathering community. So since I was 8 years old, I knew what it felt like to be in community. Now, this wasn't like a homestead situation. This wasn't a shared living space situation. We very much lived as that separate family unit of 4 people and my 2 dogs, and I think maybe 4 cats. And we were very much in the bush in Southern California, with coyotes constantly coming into our yard. So they call it the city in the country is Poway. I'm from Poway, California, which is in the northeast of San Diego. And yet my house was the gathering spot. And my parents did a really good job at creating community, in having an inclusive place for people to come together in celebration and connection. So without fail, every single holiday, there were multiple people at my house. 20 to 30 people, friends, was a normal occurrence. And that was every holiday and a lot of weekends. And even thinking about when I was in middle school and the group of friends that I was with, there would be 20 to 30 kids all playing King of the Raft in my pool, boys against girls, and then turned into these huge slumber parties of 12 to 15 girls in high school, because we created that safe space. We created that feeling of home. And my parents did a really good job of that. But it didn't come without a little bit of a cost. And that cost was that I grew up with the mindset that if you don't create it, you won't be invited. And so there was a little bit of feeling for my parents that, where's our invite? Why are we the only ones who host? And if we didn't hold the party, would there be one? And I could say that that's what actually had me build Tribal Truth, that then became Sistership Circle, is that was ingrained in me. And I not only witnessed that and experienced that, but I heard it over and over again. And I had to really work with this belief of feeling like if I don't create it, I'm not going to be included. I'm not going to be invited, that there's nothing going to be happening without me. Now, on one end, this is a really powerful belief because it allows someone to step into leadership and raise their hand and say, I am going to create the community. I am going to create the circle. I want this, and I'm going to make it happen. So there's always like the light and shadow of these beliefs, right? They can be very empowering of creating that internal fire and desire. And then there's that limitation and the frustration and bitterness that also comes from feeling like, would I be included? And the hurt little girl who is afraid she won't belong if she doesn't create it herself, which was pretty much my story my whole life. So I think one of the biggest pieces that I've had to learn and practice as a community leader and builder is really empowering the leadership in others to keep it alive without needing me, and to really trust in the leadership of others that they can do it. And this recently happened for me here in Costa Rica, where I had been talking about creating a women's circle, and I kind of a little bit initiated them, but it kept feeling really heavy. And it kept feeling like that old conversation of, I don't do this, there's no circle for me. And so I felt a lot of resistance to creating the circle. And then a woman reached out to me and said, let's do this. Let's create this. And so we held a circle. And then she said, I want to take this on. And I said, awesome. Yes. Okay. And so she started in December, and the group gathered maybe 3 or 4 times before I actually showed up. And so it was so cool when I got to show up just last Friday and be acknowledged, as part of the co-creation of this circle, and see all these women already connected because of this beautiful sister who said, I'm making it happen. And what was really interesting about this circle is that a lot of the women were sharing that vulnerability of feeling like, if I don't initiate, if I don't invite, then I'm not included in anything. And this feeling of like dissatisfaction with the way people interact these days. And so this might actually really resonate for you. But we were talking about how everyone is so freaking busy. Everyone's so busy. There's a million things going on, and this makes people a little bit flighty, a little bit like non-committal, like, oh, we'll see if something else doesn't come up, right? And this can just be an exhausting energy to be around. And yet that's kind of the state of the world, which is really interesting because people desire connection. They want authenticity. They want to belong in community. And yet they are unable to be fully present and actually be in community. So it becomes this fitting in energy versus a belonging energy. The fitting in energy is coming from the ego. It's about how I position myself in the tribe to be liked. It's a way of really always looking at what everyone else is doing and kind of following the trend versus just showing up as yourself. Because when we truly belong, we get that I belong within myself. I belong everywhere, nowhere. There was a quote by Maya Angelou. And Brene Brown actually used this quote in her book. We'll put it into the show notes. And this was really, really powerful to distinguish these two different energies, and that if we are creating real and authentic community, we have to be in the energy of belonging versus fitting in. We literally have to check our ego at the door. Now, this is very hard for humans, right? The ego is constantly trying to keep us safe. The ego is very, very sneaky. The ego has all kinds of pretenses and all these ways of like spiritual bypassing, for example. And it can be very, very nuanced and very hard to decipher, to discern when you're really coming from your ego. And so it's about the creation of the container where the ego, there's still space for the ego, but there's an acknowledgement and a calling out of the ego, and most importantly, a compassion for the ego, or when we are being run by our egos. So my intention today really is to talk about the process of starting to build community. And you might be one of those people like me who says, yeah, I'm the one who's got to build it. I'm the one, I feel actually a calling to create community, to be the one to lead, to initiate, because that's naturally who I am. And how do you deal with some of these issues that come up? And how do you shift ownership from you always needing to be in control and having it really lie on your shoulders to creating that real and authentic community where there is a shared ownership and a co-creative leadership model? And that is the work that I have been doing literally over the past decade of exploring that, mainly in an online setting, but also in person, and something that we are stepping into here locally in Montezuma, Santa Teresa area, especially as we develop our land and start to open it as a space for community. So the first place that I want to start today is with one of my all-time favorite or most influential books on my career, and that is A Different Drum by M. Scott Peck. He is also the famous writer of A Road Less Traveled, which is a much more popular book of his that everyone knows about. But A Different Drum was his process of creating community. And specifically, his intention with this book was to stop nuclear war. And so a big piece of creating community, he says, is around having that shared vision, something that is bigger than the individuals of a group. And so for him, it's around everyone having this common vision of peace and ending nuclear war in the world, which is so inspiring, right? And so as we build this goddess temple in Santa Teresa, that dedication to the exploration, embodiment, and expression of the sacred feminine is that vision, is that guiding force. And what's then possible when we have the divine feminine rising. And there's more to it, but that is really part of the intention of the community that we will be building. Okay, so let's get into this 4-step process, the 4 stages of community, as he calls it. And when you can understand this, and when you have the awareness and you start to actually apply this to groups, it becomes a game changer. So if you're leading circles, if you're creating groups, if you're creating community, you must understand these 4 stages and constantly be checking in with your group to see what stage it's at. And the thing is, it's cyclical. So it's not like you just get to stage 4 and then you stay in stage 4. Can very easily go back to stage 1. Okay, so stage 1 is pseudo community. And the best way to describe this is when you start a circle and that first meeting, everyone is in love with each other. And everyone is gushing and they're so excited. And oh my God, I found my tribe. And it's like everyone is on their best behavior. So when we are in pseudo community, we're very much in that expansive light energy. But there's a lot of ego in there of fitting in, and why we call it pseudo community is because there's a pretense and a way in which we are putting our best self forward, hiding, perhaps not being authentic, and hiding any shadow. So there's a lot of nicey nice, really friendly, perhaps even superficial conversations that are having in the pseudo community stage. And what's great, so here's the light aspect of the pseudo community phase, is it's very magnetic and attractive. Because when people are feeling elevated and connected, there's this heart opening aspect to it of, wow, I found my tribe. Wow, I'm so excited to be here. There's this level of like celebration that's there, and it feels really freaking good. So there's a lot of dopamine in the space, right? And so because people are so ecstatic and elated about being part of this, they are talking about it. Their energy is literally pulling more in to it. But then what starts to happen is the group moves into stage 2. Stage 2 is called chaos. And this is just the natural way that humans show up. We start judging. Someone gets triggered. Someone looks at someone funny. Someone says something off. There's perhaps a little bit of shadow starting to come into the space. It's creeping in. And all of a sudden, the energy is just very chaotic. And I'm just thinking about some of the circles that I've had where all of a sudden everyone went from in love with each other, like on the top of the roller coaster, to sliding down into the dumps. And it's like, I don't want to be here. Oh, this wasn't the community that I thought it was, right? Like arms crossed. This is not what I signed up for. This is not high vibe, and it's that whole like spiritual, what's the word? Where we're, spiritual elitism. That's how we can label it, right? There's this holier than thou and this finger pointing that happens in chaos. And it's everyone else's fault except for yours. So at this point, most communities, if not facilitated properly, if not led by someone who understands this phase, will just disintegrate. It'll break up, fall apart, right? That's it. The community's done. That's most of the time where we go. And so what we'll see, like in circles, for example, is these women who have these really terrible experiences in circle. And it's because typically chaos came in and the leader didn't know how to deal with it. Or perhaps the leader triggered someone. And a lot of times that's what happens, is the leader becomes the scapegoat. The finger pointing starts really focused on whoever's facilitating and leading, because they should have done something about it, right? But the truth of the matter is, this is just actually part of the process. And we can't actually get to level 4, to stage 4, without stage 2. This is the light and the dark. We have to sometimes pass through the shadow in order to get into the light, the true, authentic light, the truth. So stage 3 is where the magic happens. And this is called empty out, which is essentially going into the darkness and letting go. And the entire group has to go through this of emptying out all of the judgments, all of the make wrong, all of the holier than thou. Ego needs to be checked at the door. And this is literally facilitated by requesting that the group sits in silence and empties out every thought that they have into the middle of the circle. And then to actually empty out through something like the withhold tool, which is what we use at Sistership Circle. So a way that we can communicate these thoughts and these judgments in a way that where we take radical responsibility for them. We're not projecting or blaming, but we're communicating them as a way of getting back to love and affinity. And so if a group or community can truly move through this empty out phase and really truly let go and come back into the heart, then it can move into stage 4, which is real community, where there is authenticity, depth, and integrity. And this is the place where we want to get to, where we belong as ourselves, and we don't have to prove, we don't have to please, we don't need to position ourselves. There is a mutual honoring and respect of the differences, because we are all different. And real, authentic community, stage 4, includes diversity. Diversity of backgrounds, diversity of age, right? That we're not all actually the same, because that's the fitting in model. The fitting in is, I only want to be in community with people who look, sound, act, and feel the way that I do. I essentially want to be in a hall of mirrors. And that's what Facebook and social media actually creates for us, is we get into this hall of mirrors on social media, where we're not actually seeing each other's differences, and we're only hearing, and we're in this echo chamber of people who think like us. And so then we start canceling people who think differently than us, and we're not actually able to have these really important dialogues with each other where we get to hear different points of view. And that we can be in the chaos of multiple perspectives and empty out our judgment of the other side, so that we can truly come into our hearts and be in community. And this is really my intention of the work that I do with Circle for the world. That we create more of these judgment-free spaces and learn how to move through our judgments, because they're going to come up, because that's what we do. We're meaning-making machines as human beings, right? That we're able to move through that so that we can really, truly have this diverse community. So for me, diversity is not just like a black and white conversation. It's about people with different perspectives, different ages, different nationalities, that we can, no matter what we look like, no matter what archetype we are, we can meet each other in the circle. So when we have this framework and we understand these 4 stages, we can start to navigate the challenges that arise when we come into community. And there's not a lot of examples of communities that are healthy and thriving. We tend to hear a lot of stories about communities that fall apart. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But like, if we're all talking about living in community, being in community, what does that look like for us to start creating that? Because people are fed up and feeling lonely and isolated and disconnected, living in these single family units. And especially in the US, like driving their car on the freeway. I mean, this is Southern California, right? Where, we want to get back to the tribe, the way in which we used to live, where the village raised the children, right? This helps with motherhood big time. But like, yeah, like we're sharing meals together and we're looking after each other's kids and we're celebrating with each other and we're healing with one another and we're doing ceremony together, right? Like that is how tribe used to live. And so there's this ache, this yearning for that I hear about all the time. And yet, it's so hard to create when we don't have a model of it. And it's so easy to complain about how it's not there. And this is where I want us to really pay attention. When I went to that circle last Friday, my share was about how I felt so bored with the same old conversations, going to the birthday parties of my kids' friends, and just bored out of my mind and feeling like, where are my peeps? Especially feeling like I don't belong with other moms. Like I am a different species, essentially, than these other moms. Number one, I'm an entrepreneur. Number two, I work, right? So that already puts me in a different category. But like I love depth. I want depth in my conversations. I want authenticity in my conversations. I don't want to just talk about my kids. I don't really ever want to talk about my kids, right? Like I don't need to be bragging about them and how amazing they are. And I don't need to talk about the weather. Like I want to talk about what's real. That's my interest. So anyway, I shared this in the circle. And one of the other women was chuckling on the other side of the circle. And she raises her hand. She's like, I want to share next. I am exactly with you. And we're like, where have each other been? Like, we haven't even seen each other at these parties and our kids are in the same class. So what's interesting about this is so important. We create the world out there through our thoughts. Our outer world is a reflection of our inner world. So if all I can see and all I can feel and think about is how bored I am and how I don't belong and I don't fit in and questioning why I'm a mother and if I really belong here in Costa Rica and if this community is right for me and blah, 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 blah. That's all I'm going to see. I'm going to create more of that. So the very first step of creating community is understanding how powerful you are and the thoughts that are going on in your head and the words that are coming out of your mouth. And it's you've literally got to flip something. It's flipping a switch. Because as soon as you flip that switch, and what happened was I made a commitment to show up at the circle. And I said, I am not scheduling, I'm putting it in my calendar. I'm not scheduling anything over it. I am showing up because I am calling in my circle. I'm calling in my community. I am calling in my sisters. That switched. That was the switch, the flip of the switch. There we go. And so who's there? Women who were all mirrors of me, having the exact same conversation. All of the women who initiate and wondering when they're going to get their invitation. And then here we are gathering. And we were like, holy shit. This is what we've all called in. We've called each other in. Let's create from this place. Let's get together outside of the circle. Let's start spreading this energy, this authentic, vulnerable depth that we're experiencing in the circle out into the community. And let's have this be an anchor point for the real and authentic community that we all desire. And so I immediately reached out to the other mom, said, let's do a play date. Let's have our kids get together. I asked Callie. She's like, yeah, I don't really know him, but I'm open to getting to know him. Right. And so let's have a play date where they go play and two of us moms can just have our deep conversation. Right. And even like checking in with each other. There's a birthday party this Saturday. And she said to me, are you going? Because at least we can connect with each other while we're there, right? Like we're still going to go, and what are we going to create at the party inside of our intention? So we have to empty out. You see that? We're coming in with a judgment. A holier than thou, I'm more spiritual, I'm more deep, I'm more authentic. And we literally have to let that go and shift our intention to the two of us are holding the anchor of real authentic community. And whoever else also wants that will show up at this birthday party and they will be magnetized. So they'll be magnetized to the party because we're holding that field, that intention, and they're going to be magnetized to us because we're anchoring that together. That is how we build community. That's how we shift the conversation. So you have a choice. You can continue to be thinking that there's no one that you resonate with in your town or at the school where your kids go, or, and you could be in the conversation of there's no community and the, circle's not welcome here and all of those conversations, or you can choose to be the one to create it. And you can anchor your desire inside of a commitment to start holding the space for that community together. And the thing is that the community forms through the tight-knit circle, the small, intimate group. There's a core to the community. And this is what I've seen over and over and over again since I was 8 years old. There's always a core. And the stronger that core is, the more connected, authentic, has awareness, and is embodying the values, the stronger that community comes. And then it's about creating the container for the community. How do we engage with one another? What are the agreements? And how do we bring in conscious communication when people get triggered? How do we continue to bring in this distinction of stage 3 empty out into the space? How do we continue to hold that and hold people accountable when they get hijacked by their egos and that chaos starts to happen? We are the ones. So our work is to become really powerful facilitators and anchor points for the community and continue to have the awareness to keep emptying out when the community starts going into those places of judgment and chaos and judgment and chaos. So I'm just kind of looking at my notes here. This feels really powerful to share. So there is a woman who I recently met who is very much into heart math and Joe Dispenza. And one of the things that she's really interested in is heart resonance. And this the way in which she spoke about it and the pieces that she brought into this conversation completely expanded the possibility for me. And essentially how, she's really interested in science and how we could measure the frequency of the heart and how we can live in the heart, because that's really what this is all about. Real authentic community is a heart-centered community. And when we can also start to understand the frequency of the heart and understand and start to learn how to have heart resonance, where we are tuning in, tapping into each other, and then we're pushing that energy out, I believe that this will be a game changer. When we're tracking each other, when we're able to harmonize through the heart center, that love can change the world. There's a frequency that's emitted from that, from love. Love can actually be measured. And they've done this with like meditation and heart math. That's what this is all about, is measuring the frequency of the heart, measuring the frequency of love, how we can impact the larger community, nation, world, right? Imagine what's possible if we're able to get in sync in that way and shift truly from this fear-based scarcity society to one that's really in the heart, rooted in love, that we're walking the path of love. Imagine the more people who are walking the path of love, what becomes possible. It's truly a game changer. So this has got me very inspired, curious. It's kind of like if you've ever been in a group where everyone has ohmed together and everyone harmonizes with the pitch, the whole group becomes one. And then there's other times where you feel everyone's doing an ohm and you hear people like off in their own resonance. They're doing their own thing. They're not harmonizing with the group. And it's almost like they're not actually connected with the group, and they're more in their ego around the ohm than with the group. It's the same thing here. Harmonizing our hearts, resonating, feeling the energy, tuning in and syncing up with the other hearts, and opening and spreading love. I mean, this could sound really hippy-dippy, woo-woo, but it's scientifically proven that these like energy frequencies, like they actually impact. And from all the work that I've been doing with somatic experiencing around trauma and the nervous system, it's the same thing. When you are a calm, settled, regulated nervous system, all the nervous systems around you also ground and settle and regulate. This is what's co-regulation. So all of these things, whether it's the ohm, co-regulation of a group, heart resonance, there's a unity that's happening despite these different bodies. That is what we get to learn in community. So if you are someone who wants to really step into community leadership, wants to become a powerful transformational group facilitator and leader, like this really feels like your path. And I'm going to invite you to raise your hand and email me to connect, because we do have some opportunities to cultivate these skills. And this is something that I'm very much stepping into in a bigger way, is training and bringing women together who are the natural community leaders, who want to do this on a bigger scale, who want to really create this for their businesses, want to do this, on these local scales, like with what we're doing in Costa Rica. So raise your hand, email me, and you can email me at support@sistershipcircle.com. That will go to our support desk so that it doesn't get lost, and then will make its way to me. I'd love to hear from you. What's your biggest takeaway from today's podcast? And I'll see you next time.
You just listened to this show. I'd love for you to leave the Brave Woman podcast an honest review. Reviews help podcasts like this one grow, making it more possible for me to devote my time, energy, and money to its production. If you take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@sistershipcircle.com, we'll send you one of our archetype activations as a thank you gift. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.
Up next, do you know how important it is to do inner child work? Join me and my bestie, Anat Perry, as we go deep, get vulnerable, and talk about healing our little girls inside.